Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Doing Justice Brings Joy. I'm going to be with you. It's a hot day, it's a Saturday, but there's some things we need to get caught up on. The budget, the city's budget is going to be on Monday, and so we did get some changes, so thank you for your hard work. You showed up, you spoke out, and you stayed engaged and in the room. And there were significant changes made in the final budget that reflected community concerns. So thank you for that. I am going to be updating you also on the agenda for Monday is a presentation around the disparity study. And I'm going to go through the presentation for you. And then we're going to close out the show with William joining me to talk about the Carmelo Anthony case. You know, William brought that to you months ago, and we got some sad resolution to that story. So we're going to follow up on that. So I'm going to share my screen. And so this is the disparity study that was first, that is going to be shared with City Council, that was conducted by the CFO, it looks like. So they're going to talk about the findings, the evidence, the stakes, the path forward, and the Miller 3 post-study. I think we're going to go through the findings, the evidence, and I don't know, we'll get to section 5, but I'm definitely going to walk you through this stuff. Durham does not have an availability problem. It has a conversion opportunity. The procurement system attracts qualified firms into the process. The opportunity is to consistently convert the participation into dollars. Okay, and you know that's a big issue for me. Something that I've been harping on for years, but we're going to see what we find here. MWBEs are present, qualified, and actively bidding. The game is available between bid and payment. And so now they say truth. So we're going to see how much truth is in here. A compliant system with room to convert participation into results. The study examined 5 procurement categories. Across every category, MWBEs show statistically significant underutilization when measured against ready, willing, and able availability, pointing to clear opportunities to improve conversion. Statistically significant underutilization when measured against ready, willing, and able availability. 5 out of 5 categories showed statistically significant underutilization. 31% of MWBE share at the bid stage strongly early stage participation. Meanwhile, only 10% share at the award and payment stages. Bottom line, the opportunity lies at the bid stage in award, execution, subcontracting, and payment realization, where vendor interest and willingness to compete are already strong. So what we see here is that MWBE participation drops along the procurement pipeline. At the bid stage, the purchase order and contract awards, and at the payment actual dollars realized phase. There is a 10% participation reduction between the bid stage and the purchase order and contract awards. They cite 4 root causes: structurally sound, operationally fragmented. Departments apply procedures with varying levels of rigor. Aligning practices and standardizing subcontracting will strengthen the life cycle management. In other words, it's arbitrariness at the department level. That's what varying levels of rigor means. Some of it is full of BS. For example, requiring a 127-page bid for painting 4 walls and an 8-page with pictures bid package for constructing a ropes course, both coming out of Parks and Rec. I'm just saying. And that one I put in the record because it was so ridiculous. Informal practices limit competitive access. This is on those purchase orders, those small dollar. Activity often relies on incumbent relationships, greater forecasting, structured pre-solicitation engagement, and standardized debriefs would expand competitive access instead of just doing things the way you always done them. Data systems can be strengthened for accountability. Connecting solicitations, awards, subcontracting commitments, and payments end to end will give leadership real-time visibility. That's something that I'm hoping will come out of this study, is that we get this type of real-time visibility as a result of this study. And capacity, this is important because they're always talking about capacity. Capacity differences do not fully explain disparities. Hear that, understand that, and focus on that. Regression analysis confirms that even after controlling for firm size, revenue, and experience, race and gender remain statistically significant, statistically significant predictors. Shocked, I say. Not. Race and gender remain statistically significant predictors. Now they show us where the statistically significant disparity by group and category fall in. African Americans in AES services, African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, Native American, and women all are underutilized. In construction, they're all underutilized. And this is underutilization relative to their availability. And an asterisk suggests where it's statistically significant. In non-professional services, Asian Americans are overutilized compared to other minority categories. There is overrepresentation, overutilization of Asian Americans in non-professional services, as well as professional services and in the delivery of goods and supplies. African Americans are overutilized, but not statistically significantly in professional services. And then there was no availability of Native Americans in professional or goods and services bids. Women were statistically significantly underrepresented in every category. And then they were underrepresented, but not statistically significantly in professional services. So I want you to imagine being a Black woman and where you fall on this scale. Why this matters. Acting on these conditions positions Durham to operate procurement as a high-performing, competitive, and accountable function. It allows for pricing efficiency, broader bidder participation, strengthens competitive pressure, sharpest price discovery, and distributes awards across a wider vendor base. Innovation access, wider entry points for capable firms, expand access to alternative delivery approaches and emerging solutions. It also documented evidence paired with data-driven, narrowly tailored remedies strengthens legal posture and reduces exposure. Economic development, public procurement is a core economic tool. Broader participation amplifies the multiplier effect of city spending. integrated data delivery, real-time visibility and participation, payment timing, and outcomes, enabling leadership to manage outcomes proactively. These are the high-performing, competitive, and accountable functions that would come from the strategic business levers. So here's the proof that they offered. They did industry analysis, they utilized statistical analysis, and they also used market analysis in finding discrimination, active and passive, identification of barriers, race conscious and neutral recommendations. The relevant market was markets defined by where Durham does business. The state of North Carolina, rather than using political boundaries, study defines relative market based on empirical vendor locations and award patterns. This strengthens legal defensibility and ensures comparisons reflect the real purchasing environment. So they utilize the regional competitive market, the state of North Carolina in architectural engineering and surveying services, construction and professional services. And for non-professional services, they used a nationwide scoping. They used a ready, willing, and able framework, and availability measures the share of firms actually prepared to do business with Durham. Ready, willing, and able uses demonstrated engagement, bidding, receiving awards, performing work, rather than broad marketplace counts. I think that's really important to understand, that they didn't just use a broad spectrum, but they used firms that actually competed or sought to compete. And they did both a level 1 and a level 2 analysis. So they did by firm type on the level 1 and the level 2 analysis. They saw far more bids than opportunities for MWBEs and for small businesses. Although the drop between small businesses and MWBEs, there was a huge drop. There was a smaller drop, as you can see from this page, utilization data. When you look at bid stage versus payment, you see a big drop off especially in architectural engineering and surveying. The bid stage and the purchase order and payment stage is just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. In construction, is far more equitable. The most equitable is in the professional services. And in the goods and supplies. But when you're looking at non MWBE, MWBE, you see real differences in those payment types and who actually realize dollars by life cycle. This is just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. I think this one is really important. Capacity matters, but it doesn't explain the disparities. And this talks about what they did and how it implies. I am going to be commenting on Monday about this study. And I'm going to be making some recommendations about it. So, access to capital and cash flow, limited difficulty securing loans, lines of credit and bonding, reliance on personal funds or high interest financing, delayed payments make that even worse. Firms learn about solicitations too late to prepare competitive bids. There needs to be clearer notification and access points on contact. There's a perceived lack of transparency, concerns about the informal procurement and relationship-driven decisions, on contract size and administrative barriers, large contracts, bonding requirements, compliance paperwork create entry barriers for smaller firms with limited back office capacity, and need for relationships and visibility. Success often depends on relationship with decision makers and primes, strong demand for networking, mentorship, and structured engagement. So I'm going to put a link to this presentation in the chat. So that you have an opportunity to look at this for yourself. So, implications for stakeholders, what this means for the council, the vendors, and the community. We need accountability and policy direction. We need execution ownership. We need marketplace confidence and economic inclusion. These are things that you have consistently heard me asking for from the City Council over and over again. I'm glad that this study has proven what we've already known. So the action plan: embed inclusion and accountability in governance, leadership expectations, and departmental performance. Expand forecasting, early vendor engagement, and contract structuring to widen competitive access. Institutionalize onboarding, debriefs, matchmaking, mentorship, and vendor partnership. Establish end-to-end visibility across solicitation, award, commitment, and payment schedules. They're asking for 5 recommended themes: codify governance, institutionalize annual reviews, reassess every 3 to 5 years, publish forecasts, standardize debriefs, clarify roles, unbundle large contracts. Centralized e-procurement page would be ideal, with unique solicitation IDs, tiered dashboards, and standardized coding, so that vendors don't have to go to every single department to try to find out what's open for bids. Have one centralized e-procurement site. That would be amazing. Please do that one if you don't do diddly or squat else. Also, do vendor onboarding pathways, structured debriefs, outreach calendars, clear points of contact. Meet with the Black Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the women's business centers, and do workshops and engage people where they are. And please pay people on time. Pay people on time. Pay people on time. And then work with our local CDFIs, self-help generations, the Latino Credit Union, Mechanics and Farmers Bank, to set up bonding relationships and partnerships, technical assistance on bonding. That would be great. So do race and gender neutral but narrowly tailored remedies paired with universal tools. And they have this set aside here how to do that, so that you're doing race and gender neutral, but it will opt for more opportunities. Phase implementation, build, scale, institutionalize. We want access and transparency, systems and data, and program and capacity under all three. But we want to get as much done. I would move some of this stuff into the first 12 months because we really need that enhanced vendor portal sooner rather than later. I'd push that into the short term. Who execute, who monitors the reforms. They have recommended areas. City manager and the city attorney are the primary owners, with the finance director, purchasing division, and UBC as supporting stakeholders. I definitely believe that we need to have some kind of oversight, community oversight as well. And I don't see that here at all. And we definitely need to have community oversight. Now I'm going to talk to you about something that's been troubling me. And then I'm going to ask William to join me on the stage. I want to talk to you about two courtrooms, two young people and two very different versions of justice in America. Just a few days before, a Texas jury convicted a black teenager named Carmelo Anthony, a South Carolina jury found an Asian store owner, Rick Chow, not guilty after he chased down a black child, shot him in the back, and then claimed self-defense. These are two cases, two claims of fear, and two verdicts that expose the racial fault line running straight through the so-called American justice system. So I want to start in South Carolina, where 14-year-old Cyrus Carmack Belton, say his name, Cyrus Carmack Belton, was falsely accused of stealing water bottles that he didn't steal. In fact, he ran away. He was unarmed and he was shot in the back. The man who pursued him, who escalated the situation, who fired the fatal shot, walked out of the courtroom a free man. And a Columbia, South Carolina jury called that reasonable. Then, just a few days later in Texas, another child stood in a courtroom, this time a black teenager named Carmelo Anthony, trying to explain what it feels like to be surrounded by multiple larger white teenagers while simply trying to get out of the rain. What it feels like to be backed into a corner, soaked, scared, and outnumbered. What it feels like when your body tells you you're in danger. And after that terrifying moment, Carmelo did something that speaks directly to who his character is. He was being responsible and accountable for his actions. And even though it was self-defense, he didn't run, he didn't hide, he didn't try to escape. He stayed right there. He cooperated fully. He admitted what happened. He told the truth immediately. And even in the middle of his own fear, his own shock, his own trauma, he was worried about the young man who had been stabbed. His instinct was not to protect himself, it was to ask about someone else's well-being. His first concern was, is he okay? That is responsibility. That is accountability. That is humanity. But even with all that, even with his cooperation, his fear, his vulnerability, his compassion, the system did not see a child trying to survive. It saw guilt. And Black America is asking again, what does self-defense really mean in a nation that has never defended us? Because here's the truth we know in our bones. Self-defense is a right in America, unless you're Black. Fear is believable in America, unless it's Black fear. Children are innocent in America, unless they are Black children. Mainstream media covered these cases like they were simply legal puzzles. But Black people, Black parents, we saw the pattern immediately. We saw a system that excuses the killing of our children before it punishes our children for trying to survive. We saw a courtroom that forgave a grown-ass man for choosing to kill and another that condemned a black teenager for being afraid. We saw once again that the law is not just written, it is interpreted. And race decides the interpretation. That is why our frustration is not irrational. It is not emotional overreaction. It is not community tension. It's a lived experience. It's a historical memory. We have watched this country stretch the definition of self-defense to protect everyone except us. We have watched juries believe every kind of fear except black fear. We have watched the justice system bend itself into knots to justify the killing of our children. And honestly, we are tired. Tired of explaining the obvious. Tired of burying our children. Tired of verdicts that tell us our babies' lives are negotiable. But here's the part I refuse to let go. Because telling the truth is an act of resistance. Naming a pattern is an act of power. Refusing to be gaslit by the system is an act of survival. So today on this show, we're going to tell the truth, we're going to hold the line, and we're going to remind this country that black children deserve to grow up, not be buried, not be blamed, and not be criminalized for trying to survive. So with that, I'm going to invite William to come and join me.
Good afternoon. It's not a happy day, and it's not going to be a happy conversation. For my part, what I'll say is this. It has become increasingly apparent that, one, black people in America are held to a higher level of legal and moral scrutiny. There are clearly two tiers of the criminal justice system. There's the tier for white people and other immigrant groups, and then there's the tier for black people, where we are given harsher penalties, less grace, and less rights. And to emphasize my point, I'm just going to go over a few things. There's the two cases presented, but there's also a third case that recently happened and will be likely going to trial in a year or two, of Chud the Builder. Chud the Builder is a racist online streamer whose content is him going around harassing black people to try and provoke an altercation. Chud the Builder was at a courthouse in, hold on one second, in Tennessee, where he was addressing a overdue debt. As he exited the courthouse, he saw a black man who pointed in his direction and laughed at him. Chud then proceeded to walk over to the black man on the steps of the courthouse in Tennessee. An altercation occurs that he most likely, based on his own track record initiated, where he then proceeds to pull a gun, shoot the black man, and shoot himself. Chud was arrested, uh, charged, but he is asserting self-defense. He was given a bond of $1 million, which his legal team is trying to fight. Though, point of reference, Chud is already on probation before this incident occurred, and therefore, technically, according to Tennessee law, he should not have a bond, and his parole should be revoked. So that is another case in the long list of cases of black victims being assaulted by white people who get more lenient treatment by the media and by the legal system, and of black assailants who are treated harsher than their white counterparts. There's also the case out of Charlotte where the mentally unstable black man unfortunately killed the white immigrant from Ukraine, the young lady. That case is proceeding where he has to be assessed as to whether he is even competent to stand trial. For all that conservatives and white Americans, every time there's a mass shooting, assert there's not a gun problem in this country, there's a mental health crisis in this country. This man who has been committed to psychiatric care, whose sister did call to have a wellness check done on him because he was off of his meds. This person who may not be legally competent to stand trial because of his mental health has been afforded no defense or grace for his mental condition because he committed two unofficial crimes. One, he was black when he committed his murder, and two, he used a knife instead of a gun. And so none of the people who come out to protect the mass shooters every time there's a mass shooting or racial shooting are coming to his defense. They are calling for his condemnation. We have the issue in the Carmel Anthony case of an all-white jury. The New York Times published an article in 2015 called "Why It Is So Easy for Prosecutors to Strike Black Jurors." I do not have access to the New Yorker, but I have an access to a piece of the article where relevant to the state of North Carolina. Part of the article states that in 2012, a North Carolina judge found that in capital cases between 1990 and 2010, prosecutors statewide in North Carolina struck potential black jurors at twice the rate of non-blacks. In a pained opinion, the judge concluded race, not reservation about the death penalty, not connections to the criminal justice system, but race drives prosecution decisions about which citizens may participate in one of the most important and viable aspects of democratic government. And to further illustrate the point, one second. An article from Vanguard News Group published on May 4th, 2026. The Bastion versus Kentucky ruling, which prohibits prosecutors from rejecting potential jurors based on race, promised to curb wrongful convictions and protect the lives of many, particularly black individuals caught in the criminal justice system. However, according to the Innocence Project, racially biased jury selection persists more than 40 years after the decision. The Innocence Project emphasized research conducted in Mississippi, which found that from 1992 to 2017, more than half of the jurors struck by judges were black. In Louisiana, between 2009 and 2017, prosecutors used nearly 60% of their preemptory strikes against black prospective jurors, even though black residents made up roughly 1/3 of the eligible jury pool. Similarly, the article references a California study that found prosecutors struck black potential jurors in nearly 75% of cases, compared to 0.4% for white potential jurors.
Say that one again. In California, so this is not just a Southern thing.
No, this is all states. In the article in the New Yorker, they pointed out the same pattern happening in Philadelphia, and how many prosecutors, one in Philadelphia, teach classes of prosecutors how to strike black jurors, specifically black men. They intentionally target black male jurors, but black jurors generally.
And this is a class?
Multiple classes that have happened. Multiple classes, some informational pamphlets on all the ways you can specifically target a black juror in a way that will allow the judge to say it's not race-based. In order for a Banton challenge, Banton being the case that made this illegal, in order for a Banton challenge to succeed, there is a long procedure you have to go through of you have to make the appeal to the judge that the person dismissed was dismissed based on race. The judge has to agree that the person dismissed was based on race. And then the prosecutor gets an opportunity to assert that their reasoning and rationale as to why they dismissed them and how their rationale is not based on race. And then the judge will make a decision. All of that has to go through in order for a Banton challenge to go through. But prosecutors are taught and teach themselves how to avoid doing so. And because this was in the New Yorker article, if there is one black juror on a jury pool, juries will statistically take more time and make fewer evidentiary errors than if there is not a black person present. All white juries tend to deliver sentences quickly and tend to make more errors, make more judicial or jury errors in their decision making, and they give harsher sentences. So they're less accurate, they take shorter amounts of time, and they grant harder sentences. And this is true when I say a white jury, I mean any jury configuration that does not include a black person. So even other immigrant groups fall into this pattern. If there is at least one black person or one black male specifically on a jury pool, the jury statistically takes longer to come to a decision, makes fewer errors in judgments, and grants lesser sentences.
That's interesting.
That is what the statistics that granted the New Yorker article came out in 2015. So we have that. We have the entire decade of the 2010s of unarmed black people being murdered and everything that happened there. We have the entire George Floyd incident and all the police over aggressive against unarmed black civilians in ways they are not aggressive with armed white civilians.
Come on. How is it that
armed white civilians are treated with more grace and more consideration than unarmed black civilians? Unarmed black people are treated as greater threats than armed people from other minority groups. George Floyd was supposed to have a policing act and a crime act to cut down or to punish these officers. That fell through and came to nothing. We have stop and frisk, which all studies, or the majority of studies, shows has no effect.
Mm-hmm.
It is just racial profiling with no tangible benefit. And even the ones that suggest that might have a benefit is statistically minute at best.
Right.
But those same practices are what we are seeing happening now to immigrants via ICE agents. Their actions are the exact same They're using the exact same tactics law enforcement has been using against African Americans since forever. But it's only a national issue now because it's happening to a group that's not black. Then you have hate crimes. Black people have always been the number one victims of hate crimes. And while there have been legal actions and congressional discussions about interventions on behalf of the Arab community against Islamophobia, on behalf of the Jewish community against anti-Semitism, on behalf of the Asian community against the COVID pandemic rise in hate violence towards them, there has been no national conversation about anti-black hate crimes other than your so-called black leadership telling the community that black people don't need a hate crime bill. Even though we are not only the greatest victims of hate crimes, but hate crimes have doubled since the Obama administration to the highest point since the early 90s. Joe Biden oversaw the 4 worst years of anti-black racial violence in the history of this country since, I want to say, the worst year ever recorded, 1996. And this coming September, we're going to see the first hate crime report under the Trump administration. His first year is 2025, but that report doesn't come until September of this year. Then we have the numerous black people found hanged all across the country that they consistently are calling suicide.
Suicides that don't make sense.
Even though some of them clearly have outside injuries. It's great that they passed the anti-lynching bill, but no one has ever followed through with it. It's a bill that has not been enforced once. It's a law that hasn't been enforced once in this country. And yet we have all of these incidents. Yet we are the biggest victims of hate crimes. Yet there are people being hung all across the South and across the country. So the black community is under assault. There's no other way to say it. We are under assault, right? They are blocking us from being on juries because when we're on juries, we can at least get a measure of justice for ourselves. They don't want us on juries for police officers or white people who have black victims. They don't want us on juries for black defendants who killed a non-black person because they understand that the statistics say when we are on these juries, the juries make fewer mistakes. Black people, especially black men, are still 7% of the 7% of the population, 50% of the wrongly accused.
Say that statistic one more again.
Black men are about 7% of the U.S. population, but we make up 50% of those wrongly convicted to this day. And so there's a problem with the criminal. There are 2 criminal justice systems. There's the one that applies to everyone else, and there's the one that applies to black people. Because they deny us access to the juries. They overcharge us consistently. That's just statistically proven. There have been 4 drug epidemics in the United States after the crack epidemic. Yet none of them have the harsh penalties assigned to the crack epidemic.
Come on.
There's still an 18-to-1 multiplier for anyone caught with crack possession, even though we have had 5 reports from the U.S. Sentencing Commission, minimum, there may be more, confirming that the 100-to-1 or that the crack rulings specifically target African Americans or unfairly target African Americans, right? It's one thing to say it happened incidentally, but report after report after report has been delivered to the government showing this problem has been happening and nothing has been done. And when it finally had to be addressed nationally, and they had to admit that crack cocaine is no different than cocaine, and therefore there should be no multiplier, and therefore we need to undo the 101 rule, they settled for an 18-1 rule to appease racists. There is no basis for the current 18-1 ratio for crack cocaine other than racial injustice. Because since the crack epidemic, we had Oxycontin.
Mm-hmm.
We had Oxycontin in the 90s, early 2000s. Then during the Bush administration, we had the original opioid, over-the-counter medicine epidemic. Then we had the fentanyl epidemic. And then there's the television show Breaking Bad. What is Breaking Bad about? Crystal meth. So we've had Oxycontin and Oxycontin epidemic. No major national legislations to the degree that we saw against the crack epidemic. Mm-hmm. We had the opioid crisis and over-the-counter medication crisis during the Bush and early Obama years. No national policies or crackdowns the way they cracked down on the crack epidemic. Then we have the fentanyl crisis happening right now. No national policy, no national crackdown on those who sell it. Then we have the crystal meth epidemic. No national policies, no crackdown, even though crystal meth literally poisons the entire building that it's cooked in. Entire buildings have to be condemned because of crystal meth. Nothing. But only crack cocaine had the 100-1 rule, even though we have the Supreme Court case Armstrong v. California, in which a black man sued the state of California because he recognized that of all 24 people who were charged under the federal crack cocaine rule, and all of them were black, whereas Hispanic and white people who were charged with cocaine were all charged under state law. All statistics show that crack cocaine is used 30% by black people, 30% by Hispanic, 30% by white people, but 80 to 90% of all crack cocaine arrests are black people. It is statistically proven. This is the racial basis that the U.S. Sentencing Commission in the 90s, multiple times in the 90s and early 2000s, went to the government, said, hey, this is racial bias. It needs to be rejected. And this is the first and recommendation of the Sentencing Commission that was denied. And it was denied 5 times.
Well, my viewers, you see that these rulings are not in isolation. They are historically based. They're patterns and practices of the system of injustice that is America. We are at the end of this week's episode. We're going to be talking World Cup, celebrating our kings next week. Next Friday is Juneteenth. And so we'll have a special Juneteenth episode where we'll talk a bit about Stagville Plantation and the legacy of Durham, and when folks in Durham found out they were free. We'll find out more about Galveston, but we'll focus on Stagville next Friday. I want to thank William for participating and giving us these insights into the American injustice system. I learned a lot. I learned a lot today. I had no idea that 5 times the Sentencing Commission had come back. I'm going to keep, what's his name? Bob the what? Chad the...
CHUD. D.
Chud
the Builder.
the Builder. We're going to watch and see what they do with him. We're going to be watching that. And thank you for watching this week. Remember to show up, speak up, and stay in the room. And thank you for watching this week's episode of Doing Justice Brings Joy. Although it's hard to have joy on a week like this.